Even though Duong Thi Thi offered a significantly higher reward, a sum that should have been impossible to ignore, old Mr. Ho still shook his head in a cold, final refusal. Outside, the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy as they drove back home. No one uttered a single word. A thick, oppressive silence filled the car, each person lost in their own thoughts of how profoundly unlucky this day had turned out to be. Tan Kem stepped out of the vehicle first, standing alone before the gates of her house. The street was bathed in the sickly yellow glow of the streetlights, casting long, distorted shadows against the asphalt. Suddenly, the image of Hak Bao flashed through her mind, her missing companion. She tried to reassure herself, thinking that the cat had probably just grown bored of the outdoors and would come scurrying back home soon. Perhaps he was hiding somewhere nearby, watching her from the darkness. With a heavy heart, she lifted the sky-blue cat carrier, its plastic handle cold against her palm, and began to call out into the night. Meow. Meow. Her voice sounded thin and desperate in the empty air. She began to rummage through the trash bins lined up along the curb, her movements frantic and disjointed, looking for all the world like a woman who had just lost the love of her life. Just as she was hunched over, focused intently on her search, a pair of bright white shoes appeared in her peripheral vision. They were moving in a strange, rhythmic fashion, a constant, swaying 2-2 beat that felt unsettlingly mechanical, oscillating back and forth right before her eyes. She slowly lifted her head to inspect the man who moved with that bizarre 2-2 rhythm. He was standing there, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. Tan Kem shot a sharp glare at the man. He didn't blink. He just continued to stare at her with a gaze that was both deeply infatuated and disturbingly vacant. "Tan Kitten, isn't it?" he asked, his voice cutting through the silence of the street. Tan Kem froze mid-motion, her body turning cold. It was as if a buried nightmare from her childhood had suddenly crawled out of the earth to confront her. It had been a very long time since anyone had dared to call her by that name. When she was a little girl, she had been obsessed with cats, spending her entire day whispering secrets to them as if they were her only friends. From those early years until she reached adulthood, people had branded her with the nickname Tan Kitten. Eventually, she came to despise it, viewing the name as a badge of humiliation. Kitten, kitten. She didn't want anyone poking at the old wounds of her past. That name was a cruel reminder of her late development, of the girl who stayed a child long after the others had grown up. Thinking of this, she instinctively straightened her back, puffing out her chest as she snapped back at him. "Who are you?" The man with the 2-2 rhythm quickly slicked his hair back with a greasy hand and replied, "Who am I?" "Take a good, long look. Look closely. Have you really not remembered me yet?" Tan Kem scrutinized him once more. A single thought dominated her mind: this man was utterly ridiculous. To be fair, if you were to take each of his facial features separately, he might have been considered quite handsome. But when those features were assembled onto his face, the result was jarring and unpleasant to look at. His clothes appeared to be of expensive quality, yet on his frame, they hung like a pile of discarded rags. He was tall and broad-shouldered, but Tan Kem couldn't help but think of the old saying, "Great stature, small mind." He had the look of someone whose physical limbs had developed far faster than his intellect. Why did she feel such an immediate, visceral revulsion toward him? There weren't many men who could make her skin crawl this quickly. Then, like a flash of lightning in a dark sky, memory returned to her. "Ka Luong? Is that you?" Ka Luong's face lit up with a hideous, gloating grin. He looked absolutely detestable as he chuckled. "That's right, that's it. It's me. I'm the one who used to snatch your backpack and run away, the one who dropped wriggling caterpillars into your pencil case. Don't you remember? I used to take matches and try to set your hair on fire. I was the one who always snitched to the teacher when you were eating snacks in class. And there was that one time during the exam I let out a loud fart and then pointed the finger at you, making everyone believe you were the one who did it. Tan Kim felt a sudden, violent urge to take the cat brush and smash it directly into his smug face. Back in elementary school, they had been forced to share a desk. She had hoped that after all these years, he would have matured or at least forgotten the petty ways he used to torment her. She never expected him to remember every single cruel detail with such vivid, disgusting pride. He was truly unbearable. Regardless of her feelings, he was an old classmate, and he had been the one to greet her first. She forced herself to give a stiff, polite nod of acknowledgement, swallowing her rising anger. But the man lacked even the basic sense to stop while he was ahead. He leaned in and let out a mocking comment. "Tan Kim, are you actually out here picking through trash?" Good heavens, she wondered if something was seriously wrong with his eyesight. The long dress she was wearing, though its deep black hue might have seemed unusual to the unrefined eye, was a high-end designer piece. She couldn't fathom how he could mistake it for some kind of trash collector's uniform. So many people had complimented her on this dress, calling it elegant and regal. The sandals on her feet were also a luxury brand, costing no less than 1,800 yuan. And as for the cat carrier, while it might look eccentric to some, it was an expensive item, not a common garbage basket. The man was clearly an artistic illiterate. And then there was the sophisticated perfume she had applied, a scent of quiet luxury. Even if she told him the brand, it would be useless. A person like him would probably mistake it for some cheap, bottom-shelf cologne. Was it possible that her act of searching for her cat looked so desperate that he thought she was scavenging? A sudden realization hit her like a cold wave. When she had rushed over to Duong Thi Thi's house, she hadn't had the time to put on any makeup. At this moment, she probably looked haggard and pale. Her hair, styled in loose, wild curls, probably looked like a chaotic mess to a man with such low-level tastes. That's why he had misunderstood. She couldn't let this stand. Was she really going to let an old rival see her after all these years and walk away thinking she was a homeless woman picking through bins? She stood as tall as she could, staring down at the foolish man, and said firmly, "I'm looking for my cat. He went missing last night." "Looking for a cat?" "Ha ha ha." Ka Luong laughed, a sound like gravel grinding together. "You still love cats that much? Do you remember back in 3rd grade, when you brought that sickly, half-dead cat to class? It kept trying to crawl into my backpack and you just kept calling it, meow, meow, trying to keep your voice so quiet so the teacher wouldn't hear. That's exactly why I gave you the nickname Tan Kitten." Ka Luong was completely oblivious to the fact that he was treading on extremely dangerous ground. He kept blabbing on, his bright white teeth flashing in the dark like they were begging Tan Kim to knock them out onto the pavement. Tan Kitten. That name had been the bane of her existence throughout her entire youth. Every time someone heard that name, they would ask, "Who is that? Why do they call her a kitten?" And inevitably, some gossipmonger would chime in with the cruel answer, "Because she's the Princess of Peace, her chest is as flat as a mirror. The name Kitten fits her perfectly because she hasn't grown at all." It was a name that had caused her immeasurable suffering, a name that felt like a scar. And here was the rot-breathed man who was the original author of her misery. In her mind, she began to debate a dark question: should she beat him first and then kill him, or kill him first and then deliver the beating? She thought about it deeply, but the decision remained agonizingly out of reach. At that exact moment, Ka Luong continued his prattling. "Later on, you went to that famous university, didn't you? One could say you're the most successful person among our old group of friends. That run-down, pathetic elementary school actually managed to produce a real talent. But tell me, my dear old classmate, do you look down on us so much that you've never once showed up to a class reunion?" Tan Kim's mind drifted back to those elementary school days. Originally, she had been enrolled in a massive, beautiful school that looked more like a botanical garden. But that was the year her father was taken from her in a horrific car accident. Her mother had abandoned her shortly after, fleeing to England and leaving her to fend for herself. She was forced to live with her grandmother and moved to that decaying, broken-down elementary school. That was the reason she never wanted to go back. The very thought of the place reminded her of the happiness she had lost. It seemed that whenever she had a nightmare, the rusted iron gates of that elementary school would appear. To her, those gates were symbols of loneliness, of being orphaned and having no one to rely on in a cold world. Just thinking of the present made Tan Kem feel a slight sense of relief. Fortunately, those days of hardship were over. Now, her life was comfortable and stable. "And what about you? What have you been doing lately?" she asked, her voice laced with a subtle, polite sarcasm. To her surprise, Ka Luong reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to her with an air of unbearable arrogance. "I have inherited the ancestral profession," he declared. "I am a Dharma master. My title is Master Tien Dao. I specialize in feng shui, exorcising demons and ghosts, reading faces, and calculating the 4 pillars of destiny." Tan Kem tilted her head back, looking at him with genuine astonishment. Seeing her reaction, he became even more boastful. "My ancestors were legendary in this field. My family line is famous for producing powerful sorcerers, men of great spiritual efficacy. Tell me, have you ever heard the name of Master Ka Dao?" "I only know of a very famous man named Ka Nam. Besides him, I haven't heard of any other famous person with the surname Ka," she replied with a sharp, mocking edge to her voice. "Ka Nam? Why have I never heard that name before? That man probably has no reputation to speak of at all. My grandfather, Ka Dao, was a renowned sorcerer throughout this entire region. He was a true specialist in hunting and capturing ghosts. When I was small, I saw him catch spirits with my own eyes. He looked incredibly impressive, exactly like the image of Andy Lau in the movies." Tan Kem thought to herself with a heavy, sorrowful sigh, "Good grief. This guy has clearly never seen a caricature in his life. He is truly beyond help. I suppose you've been catching a lot of ghosts lately, haven't you?" Tan Kem asked, her patience finally reaching its breaking point. "Of course. As long as I take action, no ghost can escape being exorcised. If you ever have the need, I'll catch one for you free of charge." "I'm serious, it's completely free." Tan Kem had already started walking away, but that fellow Ka Luong continued to howl and shout from where he stood, "Remember my business card, the great celestial master, free of charge." Tan Kem reached home, on the verge of bursting into tears. When she set out, she had Hak Bao with her, but she had somehow let the cat run away. She had gone to find a tailor only to be rejected, and while searching for her cat, she had encountered that lunatic. Not to mention, he was the very enemy who had given her that hateful nickname, a name she couldn't stop thinking about. It was absolutely unacceptable that after dressing up and applying her makeup so carefully, he had mistaken her for a common scavenger, a woman picking through trash. After lethargically finishing her meal, she drank a bit of red wine. Once she finished bathing, she stood by the window calling meow, meow, desperately searching for Hak Bao. Having lived alone for so many years, she thought she had grown accustomed to the solitude, but she never imagined she would become so deeply attached to a cat. She had once thought that people could only form such a bond with another human being, but in reality, such an attachment can exist with animals as well. All things follow the law of long-term proximity breeds deep affection. When it was time for bed, she did not close the door, hoping that if Hak Bao returned, the cat could slip inside. That night, Tan Kem fell into a sleep surrounded by a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. She felt as though her life was undergoing too many changes. Although she didn't know why, she sensed a profound disturbance. As for why things were so unsettled, she could not offer an explanation. The night grew deep and late. Tan Kem lay huddled in a corner of the bed. In the midst of a hazy, dreamlike state, she heard a sound. She hurriedly forced her eyes open to determine where the noise was coming from. Terrified, she thought, could it be a thief? There was a light on, so she could clearly see everything in the room. There was absolutely no one there, yet the sound was still gradually drawing closer to her. She began to panic. Earlier that day, when she went to find Ong Ho and witnessed the scene of Lukon Kai being terrified, she herself had been scared to death. The air in that room had been indescribably eerie, it made one's spine turn to ice. Now, she heard a noise coming from beneath the bed. Her bed was a type of antique-style wooden bed, the space underneath was empty, and above it hung only a decorative red curtain. She poked her head out from behind the curtain to see if there was anything lurking under the bed. She clenched both hands tightly, even as she whispered to herself, "Don't be afraid, don't be afraid, how could there be ghosts in this world?" But she continued to tremble. Catching sight of her own silk-embroidered slippers, she craned her neck to look down into the darkness under the bed, and there she saw it, a pitch-black human head was slowly moving. No words could possibly describe the sheer magnitude of her terror at that moment. Her mind went completely blank. The human head seemed to grow larger and larger. Tan Kam bit her lip hard to keep herself from fainting because, no matter what, she could not believe the sight before her eyes, a human head with long, disheveled hair trailing across the pure white floor, slowly advancing toward her. She was so paralyzed by fear that she couldn't even scream. Suddenly, the curtain tore away. Before her eyes were shades of pale pink and that unidentifiable human head with its tangled hair. It was squirming again. The noise she had heard earlier was caused by its movements. When the head moved up to her chin, her terror reached its absolute zenith. She tried to shriek loudly, but the sound was stuck in her throat. She was so frightened that she had lost her voice entirely. Most terrifying of all was that the human head was slowly tilting upward, its glowing, piercing green eyes staring at her intently. Tan Kam still hadn't fainted, for she simply could not believe this reality. For an educated person like her, it was impossible to accept that something she didn't believe was real was actually manifesting right before her. By the time that human head gathered its strength and leaped onto her, she had completely broken down. The human head lunged directly at her face. Its soft, wet tongue licked her lips. Those glowing green eyes were still staring at her fixedly. This sensation felt extremely familiar to her. Her heart began to beat normally again. A soft, gentle meow made her realize that her suspicion was not wrong. She recklessly reached out and pulled the mass of fake hair away, revealing her beloved Hak Bao. Her limbs, which had been frozen like ice just moments ago, now felt as though they were recovering. Blood began to circulate normally again, and she woke up fully. She realized that such extreme fear often shortens one's lifespan. She picked up the cat and burst into tears. In the desolate night, her crying sounded as though it were shattering into pieces. Usually, she appeared very tough and resilient, but that was merely an outward appearance. Turning on the light, she carefully examined that wig. She guessed that when Hak Bao ran away and jumped into a trash can, the cat had become entangled in it. Hak Bao was covered in injuries, likely caused by the tangled mess of hair. She thought to herself, if the cat had returned any later, it might have lost its life because of this wig. Hak Bao must have tried very hard to escape and return home so that she could save it. Tan Kam carried the cat into the bathroom to wash it. After blow-drying the fur, she took some iodine from the medicine chest to disinfect the wounds. It seemed Hak Bao also knew she was treating it, so the cat remained obediently still while she worked. Looking at its pitiful appearance, she didn't have the heart to blame the cat for scaring her, because it had tried so hard to come home to beg for her help. She felt it was strange because Hak Bao was naturally very intelligent. How could it have become so tightly entangled in that wig? That wig could very likely have strangled the cat to death. She reached for the crinkling bag of cat food and poured every last morsel into the ceramic bowl belonging to Hak Bao. Watching the creature eat with such ravenous appetite, a sense of fleeting contentment washed over her as she took her seat before the glowing screen of her computer. Tan Kam reached out to play, playfully nudging the cat while offering it food, yet the feline seemed devoid of any joy. Perhaps the lingering pain of its recent injury made it irritable and restless? She persisted in her attempts to coax a playful reaction from the beast, but her efforts were met only by hollow, detached meows that lacked any warmth or recognition. Growing increasingly restless and agitated by the heavy atmosphere, she stood up abruptly to pour herself a bitter cup of black coffee, desperate to maintain some semblance of alertness. At the exact moment she pivoted away, the mirror hanging directly opposite her failed to reflect the image of Tan Cam. Instead, the glass revealed the chilling silhouette of a woman with stringy, waist-length hair, clad in a tattered blue long-sleeved shirt, standing so close to her back that she could almost feel a spectral chill. Hak Bao, who had been curled up in its wicker basket, suddenly let out a piercing, guttural shriek before leaping with frantic desperation onto her body. Tan Kim gently stroked its trembling fur and whispered in a low, soothing tone, "It is long past midnight. If you scream like that, you will terrify the neighbors." However, Hak Bao seemed utterly oblivious to her touch, its pupils dilated and fixed in a predatory stare, gazing with terrifying intensity over the curve of her shoulder into the shadows behind her. In the reflection of the dressing mirror position just a short distance from Tan Cam, a gaunt, sickly pale hand with jagged, elongated fingernails emerged. It seemed as though the hand were recoiling from some unseen horror, freezing in midair, trembling and motionless just a few agonizing inches away from her skin. Clinging tightly to the shivering cat, Tan Cam returned to her seat before the computer and began to feverishly type, the clicking of the keys echoing through the silent room. Without warning, Hak Bao lunged onto the computer desk, positioning its arched body like a feline shield to block her view of the mirror's surface. Within the depths of the mirror, the reflection no longer belonged to Tan Cam. In its place was the gruesome visage of the woman from before, her face a mangled ruin where eyes should have been, now replaced by hollow, weeping sockets drenched in fresh, flowing blood, staring relentlessly into the void.